Okay, hello everybody. I am here with Thomas Wijnaendts Van Resandt, and we are going to talk to you about the new Avengers Endgame movie. We did a video about it, about Infinity War, just a few weeks ago, talking especially about human sacrifice and the story of human sacrifice, and we were both really excited to see how the new movie resolves all those questions that we were posing, and so we're going to be talking about it together.
This is Jonathan Pageau. Welcome to the Symbolic World.
So, hey, Thomas, maybe you can start off. You're usually so good at giving us a little, a small, like a very synthetic vision of the plot, and then we can jump into the symbolism.
Okay, so I guess for those who haven't watched Infinity War,
This is gonna be major spoilers. So if you don't want spoilers, for sure, we don't even think about that.
yeah, I mean, if you made it this far without spoilers, then you don't want to be spoiled here at this point. But so in Infinity War, it's basically the culmination of the 21 Marvel movies that came before, and it's about all the Marvel superheroes facing off against the supervillain Thanos. And Thanos wants to gather all these powerful Infinity Stones to kill off half of the universe, because he thinks by killing off half of the universe, he will save it. Because he thinks overpopulation will be a problem, and it has been a problem on his own planet. So that's his aim. So his aim is not in his own eyes bad, but he thinks he will be a sort of god savior of sorts. And so in Infinity War, he actually succeeds in doing so, and it's because of the hero's inability to fight him in an appropriate way. So what they do is, instead of self-sacrificing themselves, they try to save the individuals. Sorry, they try to save the individual in favor of the collective. Am I saying that right?
Yeah, well, it's a play on both. You have some who are willing to save the individual, to save one individual, like the person they love, in order to try to save them and sacrifice the collective. Then you have Thanos, who does the opposite, and you have others who are willing to do the opposite, which is to sacrifice one person in order to save the totality, sacrifice someone else. And so it's all about this problem of human sacrifice.
And so in Endgame, so Thanos has won, and half of the universe is now dead, and the world has descended into sort of nihilism, pessimism, and depression. And the remaining heroes now go out and actually kill Thanos. They find him and they kill him, but they can't bring half the universe back, because he has already destroyed the very stones that they need to turn back time and to bring everyone back. And so now their aim is to somehow find a way to turn back time and bring everyone back. And they do it by inventing time travel and trying to get all these stones together and snap the world back into existence, so to say. So that's basically the entire plot, but most of it is all about resolving all these character arcs and culminating this in the final moment of these 10 last years of the MCU.
And I think that in this case, really, the time travel, which is usually such a mess in terms of story, it can be such a mess in terms of storytelling, and maybe it is a mess, but it ends up being a great way to revisit all their plot lines and kind of tie everything together. So you have to close your eyes in terms of let's say all the plot holes that are there. I mean, there's so many plot holes in the story, and they have these little explanation moments where they're trying to explain to you why there's a plot hole and how they don't, like, why is it that they can't go back again and save them again. You're like, that's always the problem with time travel. But anyways, that doesn't matter, because you're so taken up by how they're able to pull all the threads together. And I have to give them, to really take my hat off to them, because it's one of the most satisfying movies I've watched in a while in terms of doing that, where you think, how is it that they were able to bring all these, every character has their moment, every storyline finds some kind of resolution, everything that has been left out, Tony Stark's relationship with his father, the Captain America's relationship with that woman, that the agent that he left behind, all of that, everything kind of comes together, and everyone finds their own little resolution. So first of all, I have to say that they deserve their whatever $2 billion that they got for this
Oh
movie
yeah,
in
yeah.
terms of bringing it all together.
Yeah, I have to say, I went the premiere night, and I'm not really an MCU fan, so I follow the movies off and on. But I did decide to rewatch and watch all the ones that I hadn't watched previously, just in preparation. And I was like, of course, the entire room was packed. But I've never been in such an experience of like cinematic experience where everyone was so involved in the movie that it was very much a visceral experience that you wouldn't get if you watched this movie on TV. So
no, I went to see it in IMAX, and I had my daughter with me who's 11 years old, and she when we told her, when you're 10 you can start watching kind of Star Wars, Marvel level movies, okay? And so in the last 6 months she's like, I want to see Endgame. Mm-hmm. So because she wanted to see Endgame, we had to watch all the necessary, we didn't watch all 20, but like the necessary movies, let's say, to get to Endgame.
Right.
So she was all in it. Like, so we rewatched all the movies, she was all in it. And I've never seen her like this. She was jumping in her seat. She was exclaiming out at the screen. When she saw Spider-Man appear, she was like, oh yeah. It was like, I'm like with a little fangirl, you know. So I was able to live my joy kind of through her. And there were little moments where I kind of had a little bit of a tear, little bit of tear moments. You know, partly also because of her, how excited she was, and just everything was happening. So
exactly.
I have to admit that I was totally taken up by the
Yeah, no, I had the same experience, but that must have been, if it's your own daughter, that must have been on another level.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, that must have been good.
So
yeah. Anyways, so let's get on to the analysis.
All right. So yeah. So it's good. So I was really happy too, as well, to that we did that video that we wanted to do, because, you know, we've been thinking about doing the Endgame video, and, you know, there was a lot of things going on. And so we finally did it before, we did the Infinity War video, and then we did it before Endgame came out. And I felt like we really nailed the right nails in. Like, we really had gotten to the core of what the story was about. And watching Endgame confirmed that, because they seemed to deal with that very problem that we had in terms of the storyline and how it was reintroducing this weird, you know, individual versus collective. And we said even at the end that, let's say, the Christian answer to that problem has been self-sacrifice, but that has been like the kind of the Christian answer. And then that becomes the major theme of Endgame as well.
Right. Yeah, I think, and it's exactly like that. It's if Infinity War was Thanos' movie, which they claim it is as well, it's all about Thanos, and it's all about his philosophy of the necessity of coercing or sacrificing other people for the greater good, so to say. And it's actually sort of confirming that philosophy to be true. He wins in the end, and the Avengers are unable to do what they must to prevent it from happening. And so if that is the case in Endgame, it is then again flipped on its head, or flipped back on its feet rather. And it becomes, instead of this coercing or sacrificing others for the greater good, it becomes the voluntary self-sacrifice for the higher good. And yeah, I think it fits really nicely. And so when I was first watching Endgame, I noticed it very, very early on, even from the moment that Tony Stark, when he still has his family miraculously did not get snapped. And so he's the only one. And so his life is actually pretty good. But then when I noticed that he actually decides then to let that go, or potentially let that go, I was like, oh, I know where this is headed. And that moment I knew, okay, he's not going to make it. Yeah. But it didn't matter, because it was very powerful. I was happy that I was going to go in that direction. So,
and I think especially what's powerful about using Tony Stark as, you know, the main thread in terms of self-sacrifice. One, of course, is that he's the best actor. I mean, he's obviously the most charismatic of all, and, you know, they keep putting him in other movies because he's like, oh, we'll just put Tony Stark in the Spider-Man movie just in case. Make sure that it works. We'll put him in the Captain America movies, you know, to make sure that they do well. So for sure there was that, but also because his whole character was about a kind of narcissistic person in the beginning who you know, who's a womanizer, who just thinks about himself, and then you just see this major arc of himself coming to the end, where he actually becomes less narcissistic because he's able to have a wife and a child, but then he has to take that even further, which is the capacity to even sacrifice that in terms in order to fully kind of empty himself, to save everyone. And so that made the whole arc so powerful, even more than just having someone sacrifice themselves, is because everything he's been through. You kind of know his story and who he was, and he plays it convincingly too. You really do feel that he's able to even in his self-sacrifice, he keeps a bit of his snark, a bit of his attitude all the way to the end, but he's doing it in a kind of flips it into this moment where he gives himself. So that was really well played for sure.
Yeah. And I think what I noticed as well is that they played his sort of final arc in this movie as a sort of return of the king journey, as he starts off in like floating in space, like far away in chaos, and he's slowly dying, he's going into death. And then he's saved, but then he still loses his identity as Iron Man. He rejects that identity. He takes out his what do you call it?
Yeah, his heart.
Heart.
He removes his heart.
Like you can have it. And then the world goes on. They kill Thanos, but they can't do anything about what has happened. And so when they find Tony again, he is not involved anymore with the Avengers initiative. Like there's only a couple people in the building left, and he's living somewhere out in the woods and living his own life with his family. And so then it's all about he has to then re-identify himself with that identity of Iron Man, and then as is what you said, it has to take that. That spirit of self-sacrifice, I guess, to the next level, in the sense that, first he accepts that he needs to try and figure out how time travel works, and then he needs to accept that he might have to let go of his family in favor of trying to save, I think the inciting moment is that he sees that picture of Peter Parker, and he has that responsibility to at least try and bring him back, because he's been this fatherly figure towards him. And then finally, it's also he goes back in time and he finds some sort of closure in his relationship with his father. But I'm not quite sure what his relationship previously was, because I'm not that knowledgeable about the whole MCU history. But I think there was something unresolved there, I feel like. And then he says something to him, but I forgot the quote. But that takes him to the final moment when he comes back into the present time, and he finally needs to face off against Thanos, and that's the moment when he's able to renew the world, but he's in a self-sacrifice. So I thought they played that whole story like perfectly, and it's, I think, for maximum effect.
Yeah,
I don't
for
think
sure.
It's done any other way.
No, it was, and everything was played so well, because there is this idea in, we have this idea in Christianity that Christ trampled down death by death, like this idea that he tricked death by dying, right? So this notion that when Christ was crucified, the devil thought that he had won, right? Because here I crucified God, I killed God, like he won. But then by bringing Christ down into death, then it's like bringing light into darkness. It flipped it all around. And so they played that part really well, which is Tony, first of all, tricks Thanos, with the glove thing, where Thanos thinks that all of a sudden he has the glove, but then he took the stones, and there's this like final trick at the end where he gets the stones back. And then he basically uses the power Thanos used to destroy half the universe. He then uses that against Thanos and against his army and against all those people. Then they all disappear and everything is restored. And so there's this great kind of this I would talk about this double inversion, right? So it's like the Thanos kind of flip things, and then using the same narrative structure, then they flip it back so that everything returns to what it should be. So
right.
So all of that was played definitely very well. And the scene, I think one of the best scenes, or the best played scenes, was the scene with Hawkeye, and what is her name? I give
the Black Widow.
Black Widow. Yeah. Because we had that scene in Infinity War with Gamora, where you have the human sacrifice, and now they played the same scene, but now you have these two characters who are fighting about who's going to sacrifice themselves, which I thought everything was just so well played in that sense.
Right. It's like a subversion or inversion as well, where it's like, it's not they're fighting over who has to kill. Well, it's not like, oh, you have to die or you have to die. It's more like I have to die, and the other person's like, no, I have to die. And so it's I think that was very clear. Then it's like, oh, they're flipping the story 180 from Infinity War.
And there's also like a secret admission of how much they care for each other, because the idea was you have to kill the thing you care most about. Like you have to sacrifice the thing you care most about. And so here you have this admission that, especially Hawkeye losing his family, now here's Black Widow. They're the two people that care the most about each other. And so you kind of has a testimony to their strength of their relationship. And then at the same time, now fighting over who's going to have to sacrifice who. It was so simple. It's such a simple arithmetic, but it ends up being so powerful when you see it, play itself out.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like, and it's these self-sacrifices play themselves out even in smaller ways as well. And, you have with almost all of the characters, or like most of them, like Nebula, who has to fight herself as well and ultimately kill herself in order to save the person she initially hated. So it's like a final moment where we see that she's now no longer this villain or this bad person. She's now truly like an Avenger, I guess. Or
I think that was one of the smartest ways that they played self-sacrifice in the whole story, because there are so many characters who do that. Captain America ends up having to fight himself and kind of beating himself down in order to take the Infinity Stone, and then Tony Stark does the same. He actually causes his old self to have a heart attack and so it's like, instead of everything ends up being turned back on a fight with yourself, like either a fight with yourself or killing your old self, or being willing to watch yourself suffer. All of that happens in small ways, but all building up towards this kind of these two big sacrifices at the end. So I mean, it was played in the smallest detail. It was played really well.
Yeah, right. And I think because you have all it works on all these levels, it is also, the entire film becomes a rejection of the philosophy of Thanos in the first, or most of it at least. Well, we can argue a little bit about it, but it becomes sort of a rejection of in the first film, in the sense that the first film is about Thanos saying that, well, once I have snapped half the universe out of existence, people will be grateful and it will be sort of a rebirth. But then it is shown that it's not that, but it's more like a slow descent into death. People become nihilistic. Clint, or Hawkeye, he's fueled on his hatred, and he just tries to kill all the bad people who weren't. So he goes like really crazy, and so because Thanos also sees that people aren't grateful, now his philosophy is taken to its extreme, in a sense that now he wants to kill everyone in existence and just start
over. And I think that one of the greatest parts of the movie was exactly that, because in the first movie, if you're objective, you're watching the story, there's something a little convincing about Thanos.
Yeah.
Because he gives us examples. He says, "My world, this happened in my world." He gives example of a Gamora's world where it succeeded. And so if you're objective and you're kind of listening and you're watching him, you're seeing that he's willing to go to the end of his ideas. Like, he's willing to kind of take it to the end. And so there was something strangely convincing about Thanos in the kind of good bad guy, like the way a good bad guy should be. And now in this movie, he's actually totally exposed as being the narcissist that he is. Because first of all, he's willing, like you said, now he's like, I'm going to destroy everything and remake everything in my image, basically, is what he's saying, right? He's like, I'm going to make the whole world in a way that they'll be grateful to me, he says. At least now they'll be grateful to me. And so he exposes himself there. And then there's another scene where he's in danger and he calls for the cannons to like shoot down on the fighters. And his own generals or whatever say, well, yeah, but our army, you're going to destroy our army. And he's like, I don't care. Just do it, because I'm important. It's me. And so he actually ends up exposing his real nature, let's say. And then he's not convincing at all. Like, he loses his sheen of seduction, you could say, which is well played as well.
Yeah. And then it's also his line where he says, I am inevitable. He's like a sort of ultimate determinist, in the sense that he thinks that like this is inevitably going to happen, and like we have to, like, killing half the people, like I guess all the people, that's the ultimate goal. Like, that's the ultimate end. But then it is refuted by Tony Stark saying like, I am Iron Man, and so I think it also plays into this idea of technology, and in the sense that the boundless technology that they have, was at the cause of the genocide of half the planet, and maybe that's also why Thanos says he is inevitable, that this is inevitably going to happen. But then it is also technology is the solution that can prevent it from happening, but not technology in itself, but it's more, I felt like it was more the spirit of self-sacrifice that was guiding it, that it could also be something that would redeem the universe. In the end, they invent time travel, and they use the technology to, to renew the world.
Right.
So I thought they gave a sort of full view of the power and the destructiveness of the technology that they have, because the other movies are all about the danger of the Avengers as well, because they're so powerful. In Civil War, it's all about, well, all this collateral damage, and are you doing more good than you're doing harm? And so I think those two themes also played into Infinity War and Endgame as well. So that was nicely done.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree. The idea of power itself, like the problem of power, and the problem of, kind of like I talked about in my video on the Lord of the Rings and the ring, the problem of power itself, and how it has two sides. Like it's always kind of increases you, but it also is dangerous, and it also makes you vulnerable to the very power that is increasing you. Like it makes you, it puts you in danger. For sure, that was definitely played out well. And so then one of the interesting things that I thought was the crossing arcs of Tony Stark and Captain America. That those two, I thought they did that very well, as also because Captain America was right at the beginning, he becomes Captain America because he's so selfless. That's why they choose him, right? Because in the first movie, he throws himself on a grenade, and I think the grenade's not an actual grenade, but they see that he's willing to just sacrifice himself for everybody else. And so because of that, they choose him to become Captain America. And then he becomes this image, like this symbol of patriotism, of self-sacrifice, willing to sacrifice yourself for others. That becomes his image. And then you have, on the opposite side, you have Iron Man, Tony Stark, who's a narcissist, who's selfish, who's all of that. And so then you have these two crossing arcs where it's as if Captain America has to learn to also be more than just an ideal. Like he has to learn to be a human being and enter into relationships and have a family, basically. And so then in the end, he actually gets the nice little life, and that's part of his arc.
Right.
Tony Stark goes the opposite way, where he has to become Captain America in the end and sacrifice himself. So you think, like, did they think about this right from the beginning? Like this whole, how they're going to cross it, and then have a conflict between them in the middle, and then finally they kind of come back together in the end, but each one has learned from the other, something like that. Like, my goodness, that's some serious storytelling.
It was. I hadn't. You told me just now, and I hadn't thought of it that way. I was like, oh wow, that's actually really, really well done.
Yeah. And even Hulk, like, actually resolves himself, by integrating his shadow, as a Jungian would say. Kind of integrates his dark side, and so then he becomes just this monster who's kind of like a smart. He was hilarious. That character was hilarious in this movie.
He was. No. And he had his moment of self-sacrifice as well, when he is like, oh, this is my duty to put on the glove and try to bring everyone back, even though they know that it might kill him.
Yeah, that's true.
But so almost all of the major characters did have a moment like that in this movie.
Right. So the problem the figuring out is Thor. Like Thor character is a little more complicated to kind of figure out, where they're going, where they were trying to do. For sure, it was hilarious. I mean, it was so that his whole arc was so funny because, especially because Thor at the beginning in the first movies, he was so high and mighty and he would speak almost in Elizabethan English. He had a slightly English accent, and now you come to the end where he's a gamer. He's sitting on his couch drinking beer, and he's basically kind of lost his purpose in life. So it was funny. But what do you think in terms of the meaning? Like, how do you see it? I don't know if we were going to get to a solution, but we were talking about that even before the video.
So I think we need to take into account that what happened in Thor Ragnarok. I don't know if you've watched that movie.
I did.
That movie is really crazy as well. I thought it was really funny, but I think it worked really well into making this sort of rogue hero character into ultimately the king of his people, and sort of in his own way. But it took he had a long journey to get there, and he lost Asgard and everything happened. But then right after that, Infinity War happens and he loses people he just saved anyways. So it makes sense that he would go and into this depressive state and becomes this low-full person, and he's fat and everything, and he's anxious, and so he becomes like the opposite of what he was before almost. But then the thing is, he throughout the movie he stays in this. He becomes more of a comic relief character, and I think a lot of people who like Thor didn't quite enjoy it because they wanted him to become Thor again. And so in the end, he does. He sort of has a redemptive moment, and he finally restores himself as being Thor. But the thing is, I think that the crux, like the question is, his arc is all focused on him going back to resolve the death of his mom, which he wasn't able to prevent in the second Thor movie. And so he talks to her, and I think he just wants to be with her, wants to save her, but she tells him, "Look, no, this has already happened, and you can't really do anything about it." And then she tells him, "You need to be who you are and not who you are supposed to be." And that then becomes sort of his mantra throughout the rest of the movie. And in the end, what he does is, instead of retaking his place as the king of New Asgard, he now decides that, I'm going to be who I am and not who am I supposed to be. I'm not going to be the king. I'm going to be Thor, and I'm going to hang out with the Guardians of the Galaxy and go on adventures. So even though this is exciting because these two groups have good chemistry with each other, and like I'm sure
that last scene was hilarious in the spaceship.
Yeah, it was absolutely. So you can tell, it's like, oh, this is going to be good. But then you also have this. You can interpret it in a way, whereas he's now rescinding his responsibility to someone else, and he's degenerating back into a more immature state as a sort of adolescent hero type character, sort of Peter Pan, always going on adventures. And so, especially if you're like, oh, you have to be who you are, not who you're supposed to be, can also be interpreted as that you're like sort of static. You can't change who you are. You should just self-accept whatever it may be. Like it can become sort of a way of not improving yourself, or like that can seem. But then there's also the other side where it's like, Thor has always had this high image of himself. He's a bit of a narcissist in a way, and so once he was unable to defeat Thanos, he actually, instead of going for the head in Infinity War, he tries to drag it out, like he hits him in the chest, and so that's ultimately his own ego that kills half of the universe, and so then his ego is completely destroyed. So it also makes sense that he maybe had his persona was his vision of himself was too inflated. And so you can interpret it as that. And maybe so in the Guardians movie, the next Guardians movie, we'll see a more natural progression to something greater, I guess.
For sure, one of the smart things that the way, in terms of the character, one of the intelligent things they did is they had him cut Thanos' head off, which was so smart, because Thanos tells him in Infinity War, he says, you should have gone for the head or something like that. Like, you should have cut my head off. And so now Thor, as soon as he sees him, he starts his bad guy speech and he cuts his head off. But cutting his head off ends up being as much an admission of his own failure as it is of success at that moment where he actually kills him. Then when he says something like, "I'm the one who killed him. Did you kill him? Which one of you killed Thanos?" He's actually admitting his own failure from Infinity War. So it was really smart, really played well in that sense. And so maybe the best case scenario for Thor is that he has abandoned his pretense, right? He's stopped thinking that he's better than what he is, and so he's got a dark moment to go through in order to become something more. And at the end of the movie, they actually make you feel like, okay, his arc is not over. It's just starting. And we'll see him in the next Guardians of the Galaxy movie or something like that. And hopefully he'll at least lose the weight or something, and find some kind of.
I hope that will happen. That's I think the only movie that I'm really excited for, just because I like the character and I like what they did with Ragnarok, and I like the Guardians as well. So I think that will mash well together. So I'm hopeful as well. But I do understand the criticism from people who've watched Ragnarok and who like Thor, is that because in Ragnarok he goes through like a pretty dark phase as well. His dad dies, and he continuously is basically saying like, how can I be the king, or like how I'm the god of thunder, but he can't accept that. Like, he doesn't know that he has that power, and then he doesn't need the hammer to be to have that identity, I guess. And
sorry, go.
Go ahead.
I was going to say one of the positive things in the movie in terms of showing that maybe that's where he's going is that, there are scenes, I think it's in the second Avengers movie where Thor kind of puts his hammer on the table and then everybody tries to lift it and he's kind of like, ha ha ha, you suckers, like I'm the god of thunder, you're all a bunch of loser mortals and there's no way you can do anything. And then in this movie, when Captain America picks up the hammer and uses it, Thor actually rejoices. He's actually joyful to see someone else be worthy of the hammer. Whereas in another movie, in the earlier movies, he probably would have felt like, okay, this is a jab at me, to knock at me that someone else can use the hammer.
Yeah, and I think that's also the reason why Captain America in Avengers Ultron, I think, that he knew that he could pick it up, but then he didn't because he also knew that would hurt Thor's ego, and that would
interesting. That's an interesting idea because he does in Ultron, he moves it, right? It kind of moves a little bit, and then you see Thor become nervous. That's true. I forgot that scene. Oh yeah.
Yeah. So I heard people saying that he probably could have picked it up, but then he just, because he is Captain America and he's as selfless as he is, he's like, I have to not do this because it's not going to be good for Thor at this moment. So yeah, you're right about that. I hadn't thought about him rejoicing over picking up the hammer.
So I mean, that's great. That's great storytelling there for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
All right, so now we need to get to the more difficult part, the more difficult problem, which is one of the things that I have been suggesting in the past few years is there seems to be a narrative in these action types movies where in the trope of self-sacrifice, there seems to be a strange idea that we need to sacrifice ourselves, but then in order to give power to someone who has some marginalized identity, either this idea of being replaced by a woman or being replaced by some other character that is somehow marginalized. And so the question is, the difficulty in this movie is that you see some of that for sure in some of the scenes. And sadly, there is that one scene, the kind of female superhero power moment in the movie where all these women superheroes kind of come together in this really choreographed shot, and then they're like all fighting together. It's a very strange moment because a lot of the characters are good characters, and they probably could have interesting arcs and everything, but it was so choreographed that it just did not, I don't know, it just stood out to me as being this very strange fake moment and very deliberate moment. And so then it's hard, then that's like the cue. It's like, it's hard for it not to be the cue to think, okay, so this is part of their thinking. This is one of the things they want. And so when then Thor gives his power over to this very marginal character, Valkyrie, which we just met once in the Ragnarok movie, who's basically she's a warrior, and so he gives his power to her and tells her, you'll be better at it than I am, and all this. It's like, okay, this is very strange. Like, this is very weird. And then there's again the Captain America who gives his shield to Falcon, which is, it's like, it's hard to understand because I don't understand. How can Falcon be Captain America? He doesn't have any power. Like, just in terms of the story. So, it doesn't make sense. Just because he has a shield, like, how is he going to, like, if you gave me Captain America's shield, like, what am I going to do with it? I can't throw it and bounce it off the walls like Captain America does. It doesn't make any sense. And so then it's hard not to see it as being justified by some weird political desire to play to this kind of social justice stuff. So,
yeah. I mean, to me, it seemed it might be sort of a precursor for what's to come in the next phase of Marvel movies. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see, I guess. But for sure, that especially that moment where it's the all sort of female power moment, it was the only scene that felt very jarring. Even if you don't care about the politics surrounding it, I think even if you just look at it at the story level, it felt very artificial to the story. Like that just took me completely out of the immersion for a couple of seconds. But I know, like, obviously it is some type of more like a virtue signal, I would say, because I have a friend of mine who would agree with this type of imagery in movies, and he was silent for the entire movie. But that when that came on, he's like, "Oh, I love that they did this." So for sure they were pandering to a certain audience with that moment. It wasn't just like for the story like that. I think that is naive to say it.
I kept thinking that
I
best case scenario. Sorry, go ahead. Keep talking. Keep talking.
No, I was done. So no worries.
I was. Yeah. People are gonna keep saying that I interrupt you, and I probably do, which is horrible.
No.
So best case scenario. This is my best case scenario for that. Is that I think they unapologetically played out the main characters from Avengers, and so because a lot of the main characters were men in the original stories, I think they said we're going to unapologetically play out those characters, have Tony Stark be the hero, have Captain America. Everybody's going to have their moment. Everybody's going to have their intense moment in the story. And so, of course, of all those characters, Black Widow was the only original one. She does have her amazing moment in the story, but it ends up being mostly guys. And so I think it was like, okay, we're going to unapologetically do that, but then we need to give this little thing where at least we're showing people that we're on their side, that we're woke, that like you said, it was a kind of virtue signal, so that no one was too annoyed that Tony Stark ends up being the one who saves the day in the end.
Yeah, probably that
so
makes sense.
Hopefully that's the best case scenario for that. And the worst case scenario is, like you said, it's that they're showing us the future, and that Captain Marvel is the future, and that they're going to play into that. They're going to play the politics more, which would be too bad for Marvel in terms of,
Yeah. So I guess the future will decide on how we can interpret what happened in Endgame here.
The future is female, so.
Well, yeah.
But one of the things I have to give them, though, is that I think they really played fans really well, and they played the whole, because some people were so scared that Captain Marvel was going to come in and just kill Thanos, and she would be a Deus Ex Machina, right? And they actually played with that. They played with our expectations, because they give us that moment where she kind of comes in, and she's like, she destroys the spaceship, and she's just like coming in, you're thinking, oh my goodness, this is not going to be good, because like, who is this character? She comes in and she starts, and so you think it might go that way, and then finally he just throws her to the side. And so I thought that was a really smart way to kind of show her power, but at the same time, give us the story resolve the story from the last 20 movies. Like, don't give us this one character that appears and solves the storyline. It would have been dramatic if they had done it that way.
Absolutely. Yeah. It would have been the equivalent of what happened in Game of Thrones. I know you don't watch it.
I don't watch Game of Thrones. Is that what happened in Game of Thrones?
Well, something like that happens. I wouldn't say it's not as bad as if Captain Marvel would have defeated Thanos, but it's actually pretty similar in terms of storytelling.
We had that in the Star Wars movie. We had that blue-haired admiral who sacrifices herself and saves the day. She's the hero of the story, but we've never seen her before. She just appears in this movie for like 20 minutes, and all of a sudden, like, she's the one who takes she basically saves the day. It's like they for sure. I think Marvel definitely learned from Star Wars, and we wish that Star Wars would learn from Marvel a little bit at this point.
Yeah.
It might be too late for them.
Yeah, far too late, probably.
Yeah, I don't think I might even go see it. I didn't go see Solo. I probably won't see it. Just wait for it to come out and
I don't know,
online or something. Yeah, but at least we had our little Endgame moment, which was definitely worth it. We'll see where it goes. Hopefully it won't play to the worst aspects of or the more political aspects that we saw in the movie, and that they'll keep giving us good character arcs and good characters. And we always say, like, I don't mind there being great female characters. That's awesome, like, if we can do it, but give us good stories, right? Don't give us just politically veneered, just like political stories with a superhero veneer on it. It's not gonna fly. But Captain Marvel made a lot of money though, so it's a bit worrisome.
Yeah, I didn't watch that movie, so I don't know what to think of it. Yeah.
All right. So, is there anything else that you want to say to end our discussion about this?
Let's see. I don't think so. I think I've said about everything that I had written down. So yeah, I don't know if you have anything.
I think we covered it, and I think that I'm still happy that we kind of called it, just before the movie came out, and so
it hit the nail on the head, like just precisely. So it was good.
All right, Thomas. So as usual, thanks for your discussion, and everybody, don't forget to check out the Storytellers channel and Thomas's great movie interpretations there as well. And we'll see you soon.
If you enjoyed this content and our exploration of symbolism, get involved. I love to read your insights and questions in the comments section. You can also share this video on social media to your friends, and if you can, please consider supporting us financially through Patreon or PayPal. You'll find those links in the description below.